Hi everyone, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Firstly, we aren't doing Q&A on this webinar, but I'll tell you at the end where you can send us your questions. So welcome to the first webinar in our 4-part series, HLRV Fundamentals. HLRV, of course, standing for Historical Land Records Viewer. My name's Glenda and I'm a librarian here at the State Library of New South Wales. We often get asked about historical land ownership and using HLRV, and two of the common questions we get asked are, I've heard my ancestor got a land grant in the early 1800s. Do you know where the land was? And I want to know the previous owners of my house and land. Now, how you use HLRV and its record sets will depend on what type of information you already have and what type of information you are trying to find. For the first question, we don't know where the land is, but we have a name and it's an early time period. For the second, we don't have a name, but we know where the land is and we'll be starting from recent times and working our way back. We've structured our webinars to provide pathways for these questions, plus hopefully many more. We've also created handouts to help you when you come to do your own research. A word of warning, HLRV is a difficult database to use, which I'm sure you found if you've already had a go at using it. My webinar today will provide an overview of the history of land ownership in Australia, the main record series, and how to use HLRV. The webinar next week with Wendy will more closely examine some of the early record sets concerning grants and title deeds, what is referred to as old system records. Our third webinar with Michael will look at records that came into being post-1863 when the Torrens system came into existence. This is the current land titling system Australia uses. Our last webinar, again with Michael, will be a case study of a suburban piece of land from modern times back to the first grant. So what is the HLRV and what does it contain? Well, it's a database to view maps, plans, titles, registers and indexes for land ownership in New South Wales from 1792 to the late 1900s. So around 200 years of records. And that alone really explains its complexity. Laws, regulations and administrative requirements changed, sometimes in very dramatic ways. So to get a complete picture of a piece of land through time, you may need to search through multiple record series. Also, these records weren't created with family and local historians in mind. It's been produced by New South Wales Land Registry Services, who create and maintain title records on behalf of the New South Wales Government. The records contained in HLRV are available to view as high-quality digital images. Please note it does not include all New South Wales land records and will mention some of the more notable exceptions throughout the webinars. I've put the web address up. It's also available, of course, through Land Registry Services New South Wales website. And there is also a link on our e-resources page as well. But to be honest, I find the easiest way is just to Google HLRV and the word land. I'm just going to briefly delve into the historical background of Australia's land ownership post-1788, as this explains what records exist. So in 1788, all land was proclaimed as Crown land and belonging to the reigning monarch. The legal basis for this was the Roman law, terra nullius, meaning nobody's land. This was, of course, somebody's land, and we must recognise the damaging legacy of the terra nullius doctrine on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. The British system of land titling, of course, came with them, which was called Old System. Land leaving Crown ownership and becoming privately owned is called being granted or alienated. Land grants were given from 1792 onwards and were the first type of private land ownership in Australia. Initially, they were free, but after 1831, everyone had to pay for them. recorded in the Register of Land Grants and Leases, which is indexed by the Grant Index. Let's now go to HLRB and see how it works and how to find record series, such as the Grant Index. So when you first go to HLRB, you'll actually get a pop-up with the terms and conditions which you can accept. The important thing to note with the terms and conditions is that documents may be printed, and we found saved, where printing is enabled, but otherwise documents must be purchased from the Land Registry Services. Once you've accepted the terms and conditions, you'll be presented with this search page here. So we have three main elements to the page. The top box here is where you enter your search. Now it's automatically set on keyword search. To search attribute, just click on it, and the same with lot down here. Below on the left, you can refine the search to differing series of records. And they are sorted into three basic categories. You've got maps and plans, old system records, and Torrens records. If you click on the triangle next to them, it will open up the record series contained in those categories. And it kind of cuts off the wording there, but you can just use that bar there to scroll across. If you click on to any of the record names, it will only search that set. Now below on the right is information on HLRB, including some great guides, tips on searching, and information on paid research. Okay, so let's go back up the top and do our first search. So keyword looks like you could put in an address or a name, but if that was the case, we really wouldn't have 4 webinars. So if you put those things into HLRB under keyword, you'll actually get no results. Now, this is because the records themselves are not full text searchable. So it's similar to how if you search the library catalogue for books, you are searching the metadata attached to the book, such as the title or subject headings, not the text which is inside the book. There is another part of the New South Wales Land Registry Services website we'll show you where you put in your address, you get some numbers, you convert the numbers and you put them back into HLRB. But it doesn't work for a large number of properties like mine, for example. Now, keyword can work if you're experienced and know exactly how the records are ordered. It's also easy to search for parish maps, as you can search simply under the name of the parish. For everything else, we found that using attribute is a bit better for the novice. Still difficult, but a bit more structured. So we'll click on attribute. If we click onto this little drop down there next to search by, we'll see a list of attributes to search by, such as vol, book and number, or primary application number, which I actually know seems worse, but what we'll do in these webinars is show you the main series of records and their attributes. And attributes in this database really seem a mix of how the records are ordered and how they've been made searchable. So let's find the grant index I mentioned earlier. So we need to search what's known as old system indexes. So what we can do is narrow down to specifically that set of records first. Then we can see what attributes we need to use. So for the grant index, I clicked on old system records, and then we'll go to old system indexes, and then click on old system grant indexes. And it's just that first one that comes up there. So I'm going to click on that. And then you're going to get all the results in that record set showing up in the middle of the page, which appear to be ordered randomly. So each result is a volume or part of a volume of the grant index. Now, if we go back to attribute and click on search by, it's narrowed down to what you can search by. So the simplest is just surname initial, as the grant index is ordered by name within blocks of time. So let's say the name you are looking for is Anthony Rope. So we'll put in an R. And just click on the magnifying glass to search. Okay, so now it's narrowed it down to 12 results, which each cover a span of years. So for an easy search, it is better to know an approximate date, but 12 is actually not too bad to go through if you don't have a date. And the blue circle will tell you how many pages are in that volume. Now, Mr. Rope was a first fleeter, so we'll check the earliest grouping, which is 1792 to 1826. Just let me find that. So it's just this one here. So I'm just going to click on that little 10. Okay, so this is how the index comes up. So the first page shows up in the middle of the screen, and you have thumbnails down the bottom for the rest of the pages. You can also click on jump ahead to a certain image if you know the one that you want is towards the end of the set of documents you're looking for. Now in the top left-hand corner, you have your controls. So we've got enlarge, so we can make it bigger so we're able to see. If we click on the document, if we left mouse click and then move it around, we can move the document around the page. We can minimize. If we click on home, it'll reset it to the original starting point. Click that button, we make the whole page the document. We can move around again so it fills up the whole screen. We'll just click on that cross to close it. We can also rotate the image, because sometimes things are written on the side of documents. So instead of craning your head, you just turn the document around. And we can also go forward the next page, and we can go backwards as well using these buttons up here. Now, for documents that you can print from, we've got the print button there. So I'm just going to click on that. And that didn't work, so I'll try it again. Haha. Okay, so I'm just going to click on print. And the image is being processed. And we've got it come up there. So you can rotate the image again. Now what you can do is you can actually download the image by clicking on this button here. Or if you click on print, it'll give you the option to print it out or save to PDF. Okay, so I'll just close that. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to find Anthony Rope. So I'm just going to go through the pages. It's all in strict alphabetical order. Some indexes are in strict alphabetical order, such as surname and then first name, both in alphabetical order. Some are just alphabetical under surname, which can make it a little more difficult. But here we've got Anthony Rope, so I'll just enlarge that so you can see it. So we've just got Anthony Rope here. Situation is the ponds. He's got 70 acres and it's got a serial and a page number. So the serial number and the page number are your next attributes to put into HLRB, so you need to take them down. So then you put them into the Register of Land Grants and Leases, and you can see more about this grant. So Wendy will be showing you this in detail next week. Now, if you know the attribute, sometimes you don't need to narrow down on the left. You don't need to narrow down on here. But be warned that some different record series use the same attribute, so you will get multiple irrelevant record series. Now, if you're having trouble, you can always go up to the question mark at the top right-hand corner, and this will link you through to tips on searching, search guides, and how to use the image viewer. I'll just close that down there. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the PowerPoint now. Okay, so land has been divided in various ways over the years. You've definitely heard of suburbs, towns, cities, and states. You may not have heard of divisions such as parishes and counties. Counties have been used since the first year of settlement, and the first one proclaimed was County Cumberland, and that's the one we deal with most, as it takes in most of metropolitan Sydney. Later on, counties were further divided into parishes. But note that parishes weren't stable like counties and have changed over time. And before parishes started being created in the 1820s, they had been named districts, and often the parishes retained the same name as the districts. Parish maps were created by the Lands Department to be able to see at a glance what was still Crown land, private land holdings, their boundaries, and other records that were associated with a parcel of land. When you are looking for early landowners and where the land is situated, parish maps are a great resource as they often show the grantee of the land, not the subsequent or current owners. At their simplest, you can just scan the map and see the original grantees marked on the portions, and that may be all that you need to know or are interested in. They do, however, also act as a visual index for further records that we'll be discussing in later webinars, such as primary applications and volume and folios. Now you can find your parish at the Geographical Names Board of New South Wales, and I've put that website address up there, or just Google Geographical Names Board New South Wales. It's very simple, just select place name search, put in your suburb, and you'll get your parish name. Once you have your parish name, go back into HLRV, select the attribute of parish, and put the parish name in. So this is what a parish map generally looks like. Now this one was actually 2 pages, but with the magic of PowerPoint, I've stuck them together. As you can see, editions got cancelled periodically and an updated version was released. Generally better to use the latest one, and by latest that can mean something in the 1920s. So let's have a closer look at it on the next slide. So you can see the names and the parcels of land, usually with how many acres the parcel is. They can also be good for local histories to see who the pioneers of an area were. Note there are various reasons why the original grantee's name may not be on the map, so they're not foolproof in that regard. State Archives also have a whole webinar on how to read parish maps, so if you are interested, I suggest you go and have a look at that. They're just on their website. Of course, once people started obtaining grants, they wanted to sell them. And there was little to no government oversight of these early private transactions. And there were various legal disputes regarding sales and ownership. In order to provide some control, the Judge Advocate's Office established a register in 1802 where land and other legal transactions could be listed, although it wasn't compulsory. This became known as the Old Register 1 to 9 and covered transactions retrospectively from 1794 up to 1824. Now this is not available in HLRV, but it is available here at the library on CD-ROM. In 1825, a much more formalised process was established with the commencement of the General Register of Deeds. In this case, a deed is any legal document prepared for some purpose in relation to land which has been signed and executed. This register was maintained until 1986. In the General Register, each deed is identified by a unique book and reference number, with each book containing 1,000 deeds. So this book and number reference are the attributes by which we search. So how to find these? Well, the register is indexed by the vendors index from 1825 to 1986 and the purchasers index from 1896 into 1987. So yes, you might have noticed the purchasers index unfortunately only starts 70 years later. Okay, and this is just a shot from the vendors index for Anthony Rope. We can see down here he's selling 30 acres, going to a John Bowman, and it gives the book and number, the attribute you were looking for. And that's for the General Register of Deeds, which you can go and look at. So not too difficult to use, and Wendy will be showing you that General Register next week. So Mr. Torrens' one simple trick, and the lawyers really did hate him. So what was Robert Richard Torrens' trick? Well, it was to simplify how land ownership was recorded, and in New South Wales, this occurred in 1863. Instead of relying on a chain of deeds, which was multiple pieces of paper, you just had a single title registered with the Register General of New South Wales, and the owner received a certificate of title which provided proof of ownership. And apparently lawyers really were rather disappointed with Torrens, as its simplicity took away a lot of their work. All land granted after 1863 was administered under the Torrens system. For land granted before this date, you could either stay under the old system or convert to Torrens. It might be surprising, but some land still hasn't been converted. Although I too have put off paperwork for 150 years when it all seems too much. To convert to Torrens, you needed what's called a primary application. So primary applications require, as the name suggests, an application form plus a survey, the deeds, and any other documents. And they include sometimes even things like BDM certificates, which prove ownership of the land. This collection of documents are held at state archives as the primary application packets. Now, these packets are not on HLRB, but 3 related record series are. Now, the primary application search books. So when the Lands Department staff were assessing the primary application, they created a list of previous owners and deeds. The miscellaneous search books, which are similar in nature, but for more complex pieces of land. And the primary application search sketches, which, as the name suggests, are sketches or plans drawn of the property that is undergoing the conversion to Torrens. The attribute these are searchable by is the primary application number, which can be a bit tricky to find. Michael is going to talk a bit further about finding these numbers, but places to check could be on parish maps, State Archives catalogue, and the next record series I'll discuss, Torrens title certificates. So this is the first page of a 13-page document of the primary application search books. It's for an application in the field of Mars Parish, which is the Ryde area. This application was done in 1915, and we can see it goes all the way back to the first grant in 1856. And the next slide is a small sketch of the property from the primary application sketch plans. So onto the old form Torrens register, which for those of you doing the history of your current house can be a real boon to find, as it shows numerous owners on 1 or 2 sheets of paper. Old form certificates of titles were kept in bound volumes. Each title had a volume and a folio, and folio just means page. These are known as vol fols, and this is the attribute you'll be searching by. Now, if the volume is higher than 8,497, it will not be on HLRB, and you may have to purchase it from New South Wales Land Registry Services or an approved information broker. And it's actually the newer properties that won't be on. So mine, for example, is in volume 10,000, so it isn't on there. Michael will be showing you some ways around this, however. If you know the name of a purchaser and an approximate year, you can use the Torrens Purchasers Index. The other way to find vol fols that are below the 8,497 number is through the LRS online portal, where you can convert a street address to a lot in a deposited plan, then into a volume and folio number. Now this is the easiest, so start with this. I've put the address up there on the PowerPoint, but note that Michael will be going through this in detail with you. Okay, so here we've got the front and back with each change of ownership, mortgage or subdivision. This certificate covers from 1915 until 1990. Now, there are various reasons, such as subdivision and lack of space on the pages, which necessitated a new volume and folio on occasion. The new volume and folio numbers are given on the old one, so you can still follow the chain of titles. Up in the right-hand corner on the first page of this one, it has the previous volume and folio numbers. And when you go to look at that previous one, you get the first grant in 1880 and then the subsequent owners to 1914. So owners from 1881 to 1919 on a couple of pages is a pretty good find for your historical research. Okay, so that's all for today. Now, if you have any questions, you can always fill out the Ask a Librarian form on our website. Just go to our homepage, go to menu on the top right-hand corner, and then down to Ask a Librarian. Now, we can only spend a limited amount of time on each request, so we can't do all the research for you, but we can definitely give you advice on how to get started. But your questions may be answered by our next 3 webinars, so I encourage you to watch those first before putting in your query. Okay, so see you next week at Wendy's webinar. Bye.